page 123. So, John, do you want to introduce the item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I'd just like to start by drawing attention to an error in the report. References to the number 1,373 sites and places of value to mana whenua should actually be 1,387, so an additional 14. On page 124 of the agenda report, if you tally up A, B, C and D under paragraph 8, the total is actually 1387, not 1373, so a bit of a problem with the maths of some of our team, so apologies for that. And that does tie back into the recommendation on the screens up there at the moment that it should actually be 1387 is the number of sites that we're recommending are withdrawn from the unitary plan. So without further ado, there are two separate recommendations here. Both relate to withdrawing parts of the unitary plan prior to the conclusion of the hearings. And the reason for that is that well, first of all, the Council is able to remove parts of the unitary plan at any stage under the Resource Management Act. In terms of the first recommendation, and that's in relation to the sites and places of value to mana whenua, in March of this year, prior to the hearings on the sites and places of value to mana whenua, there was a discussion with the committee about the 3,600 sites that are currently in the plan. We've had submissions to retain all of those sites. We had submissions to remove all of the sites. The position the Council landed on was to remove sites where we are unable to confirm the location of the sites, where they are non-Māori sites, where they are duplicates, and where mana whenua have not ascribed a value to the sites. So that was a decision that was made by the committee in March of this year. The hearings took place in June of this year, and that was the position that the Council took at the hearings, that the sites and places of value to mana whenua overlay should remain in the unitary plan, but the number of sites should be reduced. So that discussion was had with the committee some time ago. Given that these provisions have what's called immediate legal effect, they have been having an impact on property owners in Auckland since September 2013 when the plan was notified. So for that reason, and also to, I guess, ensure that the overlay has integrity and is perceived by members of the public as having integrity, we are now recommending that the sites that the committee agreed to remove in the Council's position at the hearings are now actually formally removed from the unitary plan, which would mean that they no longer impact on property owners affected by those sites. So again, they fall into the category of we are unable to confirm, having looked further at the data that sits in behind these sites, exactly where the site sits. So there's an error with the data. Some of the original 3,600 sites are duplicates, a very small number are non-Māori, and around about 750 mana whenua have not confirmed them as having a value, and therefore we were unable to support them staying in the unitary plan at the hearing. So that's the first topic. The second one, possibly slightly easier, Genesis Energy Limited. We're looking to build a power station in the Rodney area. That was in the Rodney district plan, had gone through a plan change. Essentially the provisions for that power station were rolled into the unitary plan. Genesis have written to us now confirming that they no longer wish to construct that power station. They're looking at selling the land. There are a few submissions on the Rodney geothermal precinct in the unitary plan. We're recommending that now that Genesis no longer wish to progress that precinct, the easiest way to deal with it, rather than have this discussed at a hearing, is to remove the precinct from the unitary plan, and therefore the land would simply have a rural zoning under the unitary plan, and there'll be no need for a hearing on that particular precinct. We've got a lot of precincts with submissions on them, a lot of hearings coming up in the new year on precincts. This is a far more efficient and sensible way to deal with the fact that that Genesis no longer wish to have the benefit of a precinct in the unitary plan and no longer intend to construct the power station. So that's brief overview, Madam Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, now we've got amendments flying at us all over the place. Just hold on, I've got Councillor Stewart, Member Taipiri, Councillor Brewer and Councillor Kathy Casey, Councillor Wax. Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Oh, thank you. Back on the 24th of March, I had to declare an conflict of interest, because I'd actually put a submission in, if you remember, and there's quite a bit of debate there, but I'm just looking here on page 25, page 125, item 25, that the mana whenua and the Independent Maori Statutory Board's position has been to maintain the sites of value overlay and retain the number of locations as notified. I just wonder, I just want a bit of clarification. Have the Maori Statutory Board or any of its members put any submissions in to the unitary plan? And if so, do they have a conflict?
On this particular, I think, yeah.
So I can answer the first part of that question. IMSB and mana whenua have made submissions on this overlay in the unitary plan and appeared at the hearing in June. In terms of conflict of interest, committees had advice on that before from our Chief Legal Counsel, Catherine, who is not here. Who is here? So, Madam Chair, is that further advice on conflict of interest?
To cover ground previously canvassed with this committee and others, and as the members sitting here will be aware, whether a member in relation to any council business has a conflict of interest is a matter that the individual member needs to determine, turning their minds to such matters as whether they have made a submission on a particular matter or otherwise. I think the members here are quite aware of that. Declarations of interest were called for earlier in the meeting, and I did make a note that none were registered at that time.
Just further to that, I do recall back on the 24th of March that there was quite a bit of discussion about whether I had a conflict of interest, and I really didn't believe that I did, even though I put a submission in, and so I was told that I really would have to abstain from the vote, and I just wonder, is that?
I think you. I don't think anyone would have told you to abstain. I think you made a personal decision to abstain given the questions that had been raised. So you took on board the discussion around the table and made a decision for yourself that the appropriate and proper course was for yourself to abstain from that decision making.
So if I want to vote today, it's my decision.
It is absolutely your decision.
But because I've already, just getting clarification, because I've already, in the past, said that I had a conflict of interest only because there was quite a bit of pressure on me that day. I'm just wondering whether, you know,
Look,
legally,
my advice to any elected member in any circumstance is to be very, very cautious in the space. If there is any doubt, the safest course is to abstain, and that is absolutely the advice from the Office of the Auditor General for the integrity of the decision making of the entity
so that'd be
and for your personal reputation.
Same for the Maori Statutory Board.
The advice is for everyone.
See how the vote goes, Sharon.
And I think that's, thank you for that piece of legal advice, Councillor Brewer. It's very strategic. See if we need you, darling.
A lot of integrity in that.
So I think that advice is well given, and Councillor Stewart, thank you for asking for that clarification. And as always, it's up to each individual to make the decision according to their measure of their own integrity. So thank you for that. So let's, now, I've got Member Taipere and then Councillor Brewer, Casey, Quacks. Member Taipere.
Kia ora, Madam Chair.
And Walker.
And Walker.
Question.
Cool.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. First I want to ask a question is that I have proposed a motion and I guess my first question is because there's been no mover or seconder of that, I would propose that what I've put to you is the motion, moved by myself and seconded by Leanne. So that seeks, obviously, a change from what's being recommended up there. So that's the first thing I want to say. As far as the Rodney thermal power generation, that can stay as the same. It's the one that I'm proposing different is the sites and places of value to mana whenua.
Okay.
And simply, Madam Chair, in response, because that will then answer the question that I don't have a conflict of interest by moving to the point of moving a motion. I never had a conflict of interest when I attended the committee that approved the unitary plan to go to public consultation in the last term. And I did that in good faith as a member of the Independent Māori Statutory Board and as a member of the committee of that time. And the board, as an independent body corporate, has made a submission as a body corporate. I haven't made one as an individual, so I don't have an issue at all about the conflict matters, and I'll manage those accordingly if they ever come to the fore. What I'm here today about, though, is the change from the submission, from the proposed plan of 3,600 sites. And this is not about a submission anymore. This is about asking this committee to change its decision from the last term in terms of the proposed document that went out to consultation to the people. So I'm speaking on the basis of the motion that put about deferral because after speaking the other day with officials, Mr. Jim Quinn and John Dugan, I'm not convinced there's enough reason to change what we sent out to the people prior to the independent hearings panel making its own decision. Yes, council has submitted, which we were part of, and I think if I remember correctly, we abstained from that vote to change it from 3,600 to 2,300 in a submission. This is a lot different than that. This is not a submission anymore. This is an active action by council to change what it said out to the people last term. And I don't think it is right. And that you should enable and allow the independent hearings panel to complete the task it was put in place to do, and that's receive submissions, receive information, undertake deliberations and make a decision. And in that context, it went out as 3,600 sites and council submitted that it should change it to 2,300 and it should allow that process to occur. The arguments that I've heard for why we want to change things today from the original decision of the proposed plan is that there are cost issues. And I say this, in the context of where there's duplication of the same site, it would only be appropriate to not have it recorded twice. And any error in the plan like that, you would change. So I have no issue with that. The one I have a big concern about is when we put the 3,600 sites into the proposed plan, the information that was provided to us was that it had come from Auckland Council or Auckland Regional Council's Heritage Unit as accurate information, because originally it was 7,000 sites and we changed that to 3,600 based on the fact that those 3,600 had information relating to those sites. We understand that the council has put provision in the LTP to do the work to confirm those sites, and so we know that that work's underway, and I think there's also a new situation where mana whenua have been asked to assign a value to that site. Now, my thing is this, You take those sites out now, and they are, as they've been recorded in previous authorities, sites of significance, sites with values, you're going to potentially mislead the public into thinking there's nothing wrong with those sites. Then you're going to encounter the potential of the New Zealand Historic Places Trust and the like coming in with their authority and delaying and holding up projects that will become far costly than what you think you're saving now. If there is information that says these sites aren't real when the application's made, then that's the information that can be given to the applicant at the time. So I say, I seek the motion of deferral because there is provision to do more work to substantiate stuff. We're doing that work now. That work can continue to be done on those sites that have already been proposed to the community via public consultation of 3,600 sites, and that we can enable and allow the independent hearings panel to do its job and address the 3,600 sites. So I think this is going too far, too fast. I think it's you have a responsibility to protect heritage, and you have a provision and a mechanism to do so. You have a number of facilities in place to manage this through. You have working parties with mana whenua and have been working through stuff on the unitary plan. I think that this is a rash and bold move to go jumping in like this when you can easily defer and continue to investigate the information, provide the information. So I think I've said enough, but Madam Chair, I would seek the support of the members on the motion that both Leanne and myself have put. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Taipere. So it would be useful if you'd indicate if you were speaking to the recommendation or if it's simply a question. Councillor Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine are around questions, and while Member Taipere might have been focusing on those that have been taken out, I want to focus, John, on those that remain, because as David has already indicated, that list came down from 7,000 to 3,600. We were given some comfort at that time, but we knew that work was ahead. I think your own department is on the record for saying those original sites of value were poorly mapped and simply wrong. And you've said this afternoon that you could not guarantee, or your department could not guarantee the integrity of those 1,387 sites, and so the most prudent thing was to take them out. And I suppose what I want to ask is, can you guarantee us the integrity of those that remain, those 2,213 sites of value that remain? And perhaps a way around that is, what assurances can you give us, John, that those remaining 2,213 sites have been assessed on a stringent evidential basis as is required? This is a unitary plan based on evidence, as Councillor Quacks often reminds us, as is in statute. Have the proponents for these 2,213, have you and your officers, have they visited all these sites? Is there documented evidential, historical and cultural evidence that supports their case? And does iwi, do the iwi, potentially 13, do they also support each and every one? I just want to make sure that if we're going to be fine-tuning this again, that we're not going to hear another story of, oh, well, they were poorly mapped and simply wrong, so we're now down to 1,500. I want to have concrete assurance that the remaining sites have been evidentially assessed. They have stringent historical and cultural evidence on them, that they've been visited, and that they have iwi support for them.
Thank you. Madam Chair, so they have not been visited. It would have been a huge task, huge undertaking to visit all of those sites. So that's the response in terms of whether or not they've been visited. They are all 2,000, whatever the number is, the remaining ones, supported by clear documentation. So what we have done between the plan being notified and the hearings was to review all of the documentation, and that's where we identified some issues in terms of the mapping and the information that sits behind them. But the remaining ones, we believe that the documentation is sound. And we do have confirmation from at least one mana whenua group for all of those 2,000 or so remaining sites. So that was discussed back in March. So the remaining ones are all supported by at least one mana whenua entity. So we worked with mana whenua to get the feedback on all 3,600. They all have robustness in terms of the documentation. To actually revisit every site will be a massive undertaking. The proposal going forward, I think, as we've said to the committee before, is that in much the same way as the pre-1944 overlay is a precautionary approach, the sites and places of value to mana whenua is also precautionary. We're working with mana whenua, and there is a commitment through the long-term plan for a 10-year program working with mana whenua to look at sites and places of value or significance in general, looking at the 3,600, but looking at other potential sites as well with mana whenua. So there is an ongoing piece of work to refine